Welcome to Spartan Up Podcast. Today, we're sharing a recording from one of our daily Zoom chats. This one is with fear expert Kristen Ulmer. She's the author of The Art of Fear, Why Conquering Fear Won't Work and What to Do Instead. I hope you'll subscribe so you can get notifications of our Tuesday interview show, our mini episodes with Spartan's chief mind doc, Dr. Laura Pence, and our new Spartan Combat series. At the end of this episode, I'll also let you know how you can get free access to Kristen Ulmer's full course on mood at learn.spartan.com. This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Gone Rogue high-protein chips. Visit Amazon or GoneRogueSnacks.com and use the promo code Spartan25 to get 25% off.
So Kristen Ulmer, all through the 90s, was known as the world's best woman, big mountain skier, extreme skier in the world. And many people said, take the qualifier of woman off that. You know, yes, she's a woman, and yes, that's awesome, but she is truly just flat out one of the best skiers in the world, period. No need to qualify that. The amazing thing for us is that she, after retiring from competitive skiing, decided to really lean in an area of expertise she developed, and that was, what do you do with fear? And I've watched a bunch of her different talks where she says, you know, yes, it's very fearful standing on the top of a mountain about to point your skis down something that the angle is beyond anything anyone can imagine. But then she had to deal with the fear of people wanting her to talk about that and getting up on stages and a whole different kind of fear. And so I love that she has experiences that none of us have had, so she can bring something unique to the call, but also has had experiences that we can all relate to, those other fears, and especially the big fear that we're all going through right now, which is this weird unknown that, you know, for the first time collectively, we don't exactly know what's coming next. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Kristen Ulmer and tell you how stoked I am to have you here, Kristen. So I guess the first thing I'd ask is, where are you and what's your day-to-day like right now?
I'm in Mexico, and I've decided to stay in my house in Mexico because I have less fear to stay in Mexico than to go back to the States. So I want to, of course, start by just talking a little bit about what we're going through right now, but ultimately I expect for this to be just a Q&A, and I want to answer people's real-time questions about their mood, fear, anxiety, all of that. So the people on this call, of course, are into Spartan races. I was a big mountain extreme skier. I've done a lot of dangerous other sports as well. I'm actually down here kiteboarding right now. And fear is just fear. You know, there's no good fear or bad fear. It's just fear. And the fear that you feel during a race, when you're skiing you fall, you die descent, jumping off a cliff, during the coronavirus, fear of dying, all of that, it's just fear. It's all the same. We've probably gotten into the habit where we actually enjoy feeling fear in certain areas of our lives. And I feel like the reason why Spartan races have really taken off is because we need that kind of challenge. We need that uncomfortable feeling in our lives. Otherwise, we feel like we're not growing. And that involves fear, of course. The unknown, like, will I or won't I finish this race? Will I or won't I make it through this coronavirus times? So what we're dealing with right now is the exact same thing, but we're probably used to embracing fear and enjoying fear in the races. But right now, it's not so much fun now, is it? And the other thing I want to say is that you are supposed to be feeling fear right now. And that may seem really obvious, and it's all over the internet. Everybody's saying that. But fear has such a huge stigma. Like, we're taught to ignore it, fight it, overcome it, that it's an enemy. We hide it. We ignore it. A lot of people avoid feeling fear. I don't think people on this call avoid feeling fear. And right now, because we have such elevated levels of fear, your relationship with fear is never going to be more obvious. So we're going to explore during this hour what your unique relationship is with fear. I think you may be surprised by what you learn about yourself.
What is the most fearful time you can remember, just top of mind, from your professional career as far as your skiing career, and then how that compares to fears you've had in other areas in your life, like you know, life and death situation you may have been in, just in traffic and anything else. And then the other thing is, when you decided to become knowledgeable and well versed in the area of fear and fear management and how to grow through it, what process did you go through? Like, how did you dig in and learn that? So scaredest you've ever been, and and how you decided to and what process you went through to actually learn about that.
Well, big picture, scariest I've ever been is the time when I thought my marriage was going to fail. That was terrifying for me because I thought I was going to lose the thing that was most important to me of all times.
Yep.
The scariest experience I had while skiing, I've been in 5 avalanches. I've started hundreds, I've seen thousands, but um, it was the time that I was seeing avalanches that were running down my back. I wound up on the north face of the Aiguille Midi in Chamonix, France. I was stuck on a 70-degree wall of ice. My skis were off, they were at my chest, and there were 4 of us head to toe on a 70-degree wall of ice, and class 5 avalanches were streaming down our backs. These were 7-story high avalanches in free fall, basically, running down our backs, and we had to hold our breath. So that incident was, I think, I mean, you can't come closer to dying than that. This happened for 3 hours. There was an avalanche about every 5 or 10 minutes. And we wound up getting a heli rescue, and the helicopter came in to retrieve our bodies. Surprise, found us alive, pulled us out one at a time. And that actually became the moment in my life where I decided to quit risking my life for a living and quit super sketchy outdoor danger activities. If it was dangerous as a sport, I would do it. I was into paragliding, ice climbing, rock climbing, kiteboarding. I rode my bike alone across India, for crying out loud. Like, I loved feeling fear. I actually feel like I loved it so much that it was like I was a heroin addict, like I was a fear addict, and all of the cortisol and adrenaline that came from it, it just made me feel so alive. And I realized that I needed to get out or else I was going to die, because anything in excess, it can be problematic. And the other thing that I was doing during my ski career, and this leads into the other part of your question, is how did I become a fear and anxiety expert? You know, I don't have a PhD. I didn't study this stuff as theory in college. Instead, I have 33 years of real world, super personal experience dealing with a tremendous amount of fear, learning exactly what works, what doesn't work. When I retired, I then studied Zen voraciously, an Eastern approach to fear and other emotions. And then I've spent the last 17 years working as a mindset sports coach, and eventually I transitioned into only being a fear and anxiety expert since writing my book, The Art of Fear, a few years ago. I mean, I'm like a living, walking shrine and testimony to what to do about fear and what not to do about fear. And during my ski career, I realized I did some things right by fear, which I'll share with you during this hour. And I also did some things wrong by fear, which I'll also share. And I believe that smart people learn from their experience. Really smart people learn from people who have learned from their experience. I have a lot of experience. So
and we have a lot of smart people on this call.
Yes.
who know that it's better to learn from your avalanches than their own.
Yes,
So.
don't do what I did wrong. Trust me, you don't want to do that. And what I did wrong, I'll tell you right now, is I ignored my fear during my ski career. I also really loved fear and embraced it. And I had a real paradox going on. But the part of me that ignored my fear, I'm lucky to be alive, but it led to burnout. I mean, it was exhausting trying to block out fear for all those years. Led to PTSD. I saw a lot of death and destruction in the mountains. Didn't know how to deal with the emotions properly. That led to PTSD. I led to a lot of injury. I had to become a really rigid, stoic, arrogant person in order to be fearless. And of course, I wasn't fearless, but in a sport as violent as extreme skiing, if you're rigid, you're going to break. I became like a rigid tree in a heavy wind, and I started breaking a lot. And you can get away with ignoring fear for about 10 years tops, and then your life will just start to come unraveled. So for anybody that's on the call that feels like they don't feel fear, or they're fearless even during this time, great. You may even feel morally superior. I didn't back then. I just was what I was, but you're not fearless, actually. You're probably just really good at ignoring fear, and there are consequences for that.
I'm going to take a question a second from someone, but I loved in something I was reading when you said you can call me a lot of things, don't ever call me fearless. And I love that.
I had one extremely huge revelation once about fear, and it's this, uh, that that awful feeling we associate with fear is actually not fear. That's our resistance to feeling fear. That's our, I don't want to feel this. I'm embarrassed about this. I wish it weren't so. Make it stop. That's the awful feeling associated with fear, not the fear itself. And the fear itself is actually a pretty energized, excited feeling, like presence and focus. And that single revelation is what I've built my entire career around. And everything that I unpack since just kind of stems from that center. It's like the centerpiece of the puzzle.
My ex-wife posted something very funny today. She said, "I really wish that I could live my life the way that I drunk dance, because then it'd be completely honest and real and unafraid." And I thought, not sure Chris drunk dancing, but it is such a great analogy that, if we could just go through our life with that kind of confidence that we have when we've had one too many drinks at a wedding.
And let me say one thing to that. Like, what is courage? Courage is a willingness to feel fear. It's like it's a willingness to go and do the scary thing.
Marion, I want to come back to you for a question.
I'd love to talk about, a big part of what is happening in the world right now is fear, because there's so much unknown. And I'd love if you could just talk us through your process and how that applies. How can people continue to function and to be productive and to be positive and to be strong while there is this sort of looming sense of unknown and, for many, fear?
A lot of uncertainty about the future right now. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't even know if all the people on this podcast are even going to survive this. So when you start to think about the future and project fear about the future, you start to feel out of control. There's fear from the past, there's fear in the future. And really, all that really matters is the fear that you have right now. Like, if you try to clap your hands in the past, you can't do it. If you try to clap your hands in the future, you can't do it. You can only clap your hands right now. So what I recommend is that people just sit with their fear right now. I'm afraid that, like my husband, he's an Adonis. He's young and fit and all that, but he has a lung issue. Like, if he gets even the slightest bit tired, he just starts coughing violently. So he is probably particularly prone to dying from the coronavirus. So we have a lot of fear right now about that, right? It's rightfully so. And so our fear about that is making us isolate thoroughly. Your fear is actually here for a reason, and it's here to help you solve this problem. Like, the coronavirus is the problem, and the subsequent fear is actually the solution, because if you're willing to listen to it and sit with it, it will make you very wise and sharp and give you a chance to make on-point decisions. So heed the message of your fear. As for staying positive, I said at the beginning that we have this stigma around fear, that it's some sort of negative thing. It's not true. It's actually a really positive force in our lives. Like, nature did get it right. And if you can sit with your fear and have a positive attitude about your fear, then you're going to be a more positive person. If you try to get rid of your fear and replace it with love or calm, all of that is called spiritual bypassing. And we make fun of it on sitcoms. And there's a reason why we make fun of it on sitcoms like Serenity Now on Seinfeld or Stuart Smalley on Saturday Night Live. It's because it doesn't work. It may make you feel better for a moment, but you're now trying to override your primary safety mechanism called fear by trying to rush to something positive. Can you spend some time with the negative part of life? Can you shine the light of consciousness on it and find out that, in the words of the Beastie Boys, darkness is not the opposite of light, it's just the absence of light. If you shine the light of consciousness on your fear and other unpleasant emotions, you will learn that they are not dark at all. They're actually here to offer you something very useful and important. If nothing else, negative emotions, a feeling of just being alive, like we're here to feel. Well, right now, we're all feeling very afraid. I've never felt more alive. Have you? So that's what I recommend.
I love anyone who quotes the Beastie Boys. That's fantastic. When we look at fear and the fear of the unknown, I think when something's unknown, if we're assuming it's going to come out badly, we get very fearful. We can also assume it's going to come out well. I mean, obviously, we have to be responsible with our assumptions, but I'm picturing you being on the top of a run that's never been done before with conditions that you've done your due diligence, but you still can't guarantee. You would never turn your skis down if the voice in your head was saying, 100% for sure this is going to work out badly. This is gonna slide. This is all bad. This is all going to go bad. This is all going to go bad. And I think that right now, when we're checking the news 10 times a day, and when we're listening to neighbors say how bad everything's going to be, and if we get into that mindset of it's going to be bad, it's going to be bad, it's really hard to move forward. So when you've been in a situation where you have to steel your mind, when you have to choose to envision a positive outcome to allow you to even set out on that run, what techniques have you used to focus on the probable positive outcomes?
I had no idea that I was doing this during my ski career, but I see now what I was doing. So let's say I was standing on top of an Alaskan peak and it's 55 degrees. It's never been skied before. I'm not quite sure where I'm going. It's 3,000 vertical feet. They're filming from the helicopter. It's $50, $50. I'm going to jump off a cliff halfway down. I'm not quite sure where the cliff is. Like, it's very, very scary. And fear is, of course, going to be there. And right now, this is a very, very scary time. Of course, fear is going to be there. So there's 4 basic choices that you can make. And most of this is just being carried out, just habitually patterned since childhood. I'm going to list them from worst way to deal with fear to best way to deal with fear. And I mentioned before I had a paradox going on. I both did the first way and the 4th way. So pay attention. The first way is you can resist your fear. And resistance can show up in many different forms. You could ignore it. You could block it out. You could rationalize it away, like, I got this, If you do that, it's the worst way to deal with fear because you're now not listening to your intuition. And you're also leaving behind your primary safety mechanism there to make you magnificent. Like, see yourself as Batman, right? And your fear as Robin. And resistance is like punching Robin in the face. Like, it gives you a moment of like, oh, he's gone, thank God. But you've now rendered yourself kind of weak and you're not going to do as great on the run because you don't have that support. And there's also a more compromised future for you in the you want to have Robin there with you by your side, not as an enemy. So second way of dealing with fear, that's a step in the right direction. You want to accept it. Like, okay, Robin, like, I accept that you're here, you're part of the deal, but it reeks of, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. I really rather you weren't here. Like, it's a step in the right direction, but we're not quite there. The third way is you can embrace it. And then the 4th way, which is what's going to take you into an optimal flow state, is you can become intimate with it. So Batman and Robin, stronger together than apart. And next thing you know, I come alive with fear. I'm more sharp. I'm more focused. My hearing's better. My eyesight's better. I'm all about reaction. I'm in my body. Fear is an emotion that you feel in your body, proven by science. We feel it there first. It doesn't get to your thoughts unless you're in resistance to it. So next thing you know, I'm in my body and operating from an intuitive reactionary state. And I make intuitive, sharp decisions. First of all, fight or flee. I'll flee, like, okay, this is too much. I'm out of here. Or I'm going to fight and bring my A game to this run, and I push off. Now, this is something that I have interviewed. I mean, I've interviewed Alex Honnold. I've interviewed Laird Hamilton, Alex being the guy that free soloed El Cap, Laird Hamilton, big wave surfer. Like, this is what we're doing. This is what these top athletes are doing. And I will say that the best of the best in the world have an intimate relationship with fear, and the second best in the world on down all have a resistant or ignoring approach to fear. That is going to change. The future is that we're all eventually going to learn how to do this. But that is what I've seen. I found that 99% of all athletes actually have the first approach, resistance. And like I said, there are long-term consequences to that. And then you also leave your most trusted ally and asset on the table, which is your Robin, your fear. So that's what I recommend. And for anything, including right now with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Well, what a great answer. Ike, we'll unmute Ike and bring Ike in from New York.
Thank you so much for being on. And again, thank you for having me. This has been such a special place for me to be able to come every day and just feel like connected and learn so much. Donnie was talking about the fear of rejection. And to take that kind of a step further, I know with myself, one thing I really struggle with is that fear of failure, and kind of trying to define what that is and being able to parse out what is in my control versus not in my control. Like I can be doing a deal and read every doc and talk to every lawyer and everything happens. And then somebody just forgot to execute a page and it gets pushed off a week. And that was totally out of my control. And I feel very fearful of that, or very anxious about that. Can you talk about that fear of failure and parsing out kind of control?
I read an article recently that said fear of failure is the biggest thing that holds us all back. And I'm like, what? That's not true. Actually, fear of failure will motivate some people to bring their A game so as not to fail. And other people, it'll hold them back. What's the difference? It's very simple. If you ignore your fear of failure, if you fight it, if you try to get rid of it, it'll be your biggest holdback. If you become intimate with your fear of failure, it'll become your greatest motivator to get your butt off the couch so as not and bring your A game to everything that you do so as not to fail. So really all it comes down to is, what is your relationship with your fear of failure? Are you embracing it? Are you using it as a tool to be magnificent? Or are you, like a lot of people regarding fear of failure, they just want to get rid of it or they want to avoid it. That's what leads to procrastination. It's like, I'm afraid that if I act on my big business idea that I'm going to fail. Well, I don't want to feel this fear, so I'm not going to act on my big business idea. We blame the fear for holding us back, is what I'm saying, when really we should blame our reaction to the fear. We're running away from the fear. As for control, I think that right now people are beginning to realize that we kind of only have an illusion of control on this planet. Like, what really can you control? Well, you can control what time you get up in the morning. Addiction, but I'm a lot of control there. Right now, like, imagine if there's a space alien, like looking down on this crazy planet Earth, and everybody's feeling so out of control. What would they see? They would see a lot of people that actually thought that they had some control over their lives. Um, Control is a big issue for people right now because they feel so out of control, and they feel out of control. And it's what leads to OCD. Like, if people feel out of control, they'll try to control other people. Like, I don't want to deal with my fear, and I feel out of control because I can't control my fear. So I'm going to make other people deal with my fear, and I'm going to control them. So trying to control things, I mean, you kind of have to. Like, you got to control what time you start work. You got to control what you say or don't say to your wife. These little things that we can control, but the bigger picture is we have no control. We have this illusion of control. And if you can kind of just go belly up, certainly right now, and just relinquish all control and just let the river take you where it wants to take you, I think that the universe wants us to succeed. Just kind of flow with your fear, flow with just kind of feeling out of control right now, and then seize the opportunities as they appear. So it's kind of a sing-songy answer. I guess in practical terms, I would just say, look at your relationship with fear. Look at your relationship with fear of failure. Are you in resistance to it, or are you intimate with it? Ask yourself that. Second thing is, look at your relationship with control. Are you, to borrow a poem, trying to control the things that you can control? You don't want to waste your time trying to control the things that you can't control. And do you have the wisdom to know the difference?
Thank you so much. That was super, super helpful, really, really on point and really, really great. So thank you. And I think you're right. I think this time with us at coronavirus has helped us kind of parse out what is in our control and not. I used to be like a major germaphobe. And I realized no matter how closely I practice everything of washing my hands now, there's no control over whether or not 70%, 40%, whatever the stats tell us the population is going to hit and get it. I'm obviously practicing social distancing, staying home, washing my hands, but it's totally out of my control whether or not somebody in the elevator of my building has it or not.
It's amazing right now when our attention is being drawn so much to the things we can't control. I can't control if there are enough masks in hospitals. I can't control what the stock market's doing. I can't control all that. And yet when I'm talking with my coaching clients, I talk to them about there's so much that you can control. You can control, as Kristen says, what time you get up in the morning. You can control what you're eating. You can control, and so when we're faced with these things that are outside our control and we're so fearful, we tend to relinquish control over the things that we can, because we just focus on all the things that we can't. There's so much that we can be doing in our own personal lives that you're right. It makes no sense to worry and focus on the things that are outside your control.
You really can't control your mood. I see it like droplets of water coming through a hose. Like here comes fear, here comes sadness, here comes anger, here comes feeling out of control. Like these are 10,000 droplets. The traditional number in Zen is 10,000. And if you're in flow with all of them, they're supposed to come into, through, and out of your life like water in about 10 to 90 seconds. So if you try to control one of them, if you try to replace fear with calm, or if you see feeling out of control and you wish it weren't so, and you try to get back into control and you don't honor that mood that's coming through the hose right now, the hose gets kinked. And then it just starts recirculating round and round and round. This is actually the cause of anxiety disorders. Like fear is part of everyday life. Here comes fear. We're taught to get rid of it. It's an enemy, fight it, conquer it. Hose gets kinked round and round and round. You're no longer in flow with your life, and you now have OCD, or you now have an anxiety disorder. Like, you do not want to kink the hose. So what we do have control over is not our moods, but how we react to the moods. Like, can you learn how to be in flow with your many moods? And that is the question that we can be asking ourselves right now during this time, where we have actually the luxury to spend a bit of time just sitting with our moods, being with our moods. And maybe for the first time in our lives, acknowledging that it's normal and natural to feel fear. Like, that can be super profound. So just instead of let it go, like breathing exercise, it's just let it be. And juice each mood like an orange. They're all here to help you feel alive, make great decisions. Like, there are no bad droplets of water. There are no negative states of being. If you shine the light of consciousness on them, like Beastie Boys, we were saying before, these 10,000 droplets of water are your 10,000 wisdoms, your 10,000 motivators. And drop by drop by drop, the way that the universe is intending this is for you to become a mighty river.
Hey, Kristen, you've referenced some great traditions, the Zen traditions and things like that. Do you have any formal practices that you do that have helped you over the years?
Yes. I have actually an exercise that I can leave you guys with that I do whenever I'm feeling crummy. And that includes when I'm about to give a speech, when I'm fighting with my husband, which we're fine now. We're doing great. We're actually having a really good time together. I do this whenever I wake up in a bad mood. And this is how I honor my bad moods, or I honor my fear. It's a 4-step process. And the first step, it takes about 2 minutes. And actually, let me give you an example. I was about to give a speech once, and it was about fear and anxiety. And I was about to go on stage, and I was practically having a panic attack. And I'm a facilitator. This is at the beginning before I started giving a lot of speeches. And good thing I knew what to do, but what would most people do? They would say, "Oh, I got this. There's nothing to be afraid of." Like, that's just more resistance, repression. It might get you through a moment, but actually it'll lead to more and more anxiety over time. And eventually I would quit giving speeches. So I did this instead. This is very new and cutting edge. So pay attention, because this works. I went behind a building, 4 steps. I first acknowledged that it's normal and natural for me to feel fear. I'm about to give a speech. Very scary thing to do. It was way out of my comfort zone. It was a big audience too, an important audience. Second step, I closed my eyes, and hopefully, I suspect you guys all have a good relationship with your body. I did a body scan, and I noticed, what did I feel? I felt nervousness, which is another name for fear. Anxiety, nervousness, worry, these are just other names for fear. And it was in my chest and in my throat. And so I put my hand on that spot, and it was a level 10 out of 10. I was feeling really nervous. And I want to introduce an equation: suffering equals discomfort times resistance. So step 2, I was identifying my discomfort, which is normal and natural to feel. Step 3, I then noticed, what is my relationship with that fear? And sure enough, I was resisting it. I was wishing it weren't so. And it was also a level 10. What's 10 times 10? That's 100. That's a lot of suffering. And I was kind of upset with myself because I wrote a whole book about not resisting fear, right? Damn it. And here I was myself doing it, but we're so conditioned. And resistance, you actually have some control over. Like, you were specifically taught to resist our fear. And that's what's caused all our anxiety and other emotional disorders in our culture. So, first, I spent some quality time just feeling my resistance. For 1 minute, I just repeated over and over again: I don't want to feel this. I don't want to be here. I just wish I were home watching a movie. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. It's like a whining child that was just trying to get my attention. And I just gave it a stage just to speak and just express itself. And after about a minute, the resistance ran out of things to say and it went down to a level 1. And then, fourth step, I then spent some time just feeling my discomfort. Also see it like a whining child. Like, if there's something that just feels awful inside of you, it's like if you ignore it, it'll just get louder and louder over time. But if you turn toward it, it's counterintuitive. Step 4, and I just let it speak. And my fear I just felt it. I gave it some love. And like children do, when you give them your undivided love and attention, it calmed right down to a level 1. What's 1 times 1? That's a lot less suffering. This took me 2 minutes, and I got down to a really comfortable level of fear, still enough so that I could give a great speech, because you don't want to go out without fear. It's going to make you more sharp and focused and present. But I got rid of my suffering, and I did it without repression. I did it without trying to spiritually bypass it. And this is what I recommend as a practice. I'm going to go over it real quick again. Normal and natural. Step 2, find the discomfort. Step 3, notice your relationship with that discomfort. Spend some quality time with whatever your relationship is. And then step 4, feel the discomfort itself without trying to get rid of it.
Like that. Thank you very, very much. Sephra, our seed huntress, our fellow co-host, is here. She had some audio issues yesterday. Sephra, are you in a better internet spot today if we unmute you here?
Kristen, thank you so much for being on. It's great to see you and hear all this very timely advice. I kind of want to go back to what you said, and I'm sorry I joined a little bit late, so I hope I'm not asking you to repeat something, but I have been OCD my whole life, and I consider it a gift, not a disorder, because I think oftentimes people who are paying attention to the details and just have this hyper awareness, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And certainly in cases like this, how do you kind of moderate between hyper awareness and anxiety?
It really comes down to, if you have an excessive behavior that is either hurting your enjoyment of your life, or driving people away, or alienating you, or making you feel bad about yourself, then it's an issue. It's like, not that this is the same as you, but like alcoholism. For a while there, people were saying, oh, you're an alcoholic if you've ever blacked out, right? Now they're saying, okay, you're an alcoholic if you drink, so many drinks a day. Like, ultimately, it comes down to, is it messing up your life? And if it's not, then it's fine. Like, the world needs more kind of eccentric people. Like, I have my own version of OCD. I put a lot of sunblock on. So, and it's not harming anybody. And I have prettier skin for it. Like, what's the big deal? It really, though, sometimes can tip over the edge for people, where it becomes about, okay, I feel so out of control about a certain aspect of my life that I'm going to do excessive behaviors to feel like I'm more in control, that it becomes an issue. And I will also say that I came up with this flight list, these things that people do in order to not feel their fear. And some of the things that people do is they become really, really busy. It's a way to not have to let their fear catch up with them. Other people are in their heads all the time. It's a way to not have to feel the feelings in your body. So if you're washing your hands a lot, is a way to feel more in control of your life, like no big deal. But if you're all of a sudden not leaving the house and become a super big time germaphobe and it's hurting your enjoyment of life, then it's time to kind of look at your fear and what is it that you're not dealing with. Some other things that people do, of course, drink alcohol, smoke pot, eat a lot of food. People say, oh, I'm an emotional eater. Well, actually, that's not how people deal with their emotions. It's how people not deal with their emotions. So they do it to not feel their fear. And it lasts for as long as you're eating the food. And then it's right back. And so can you actually turn towards the thing that you've been trying to control, and spend some time getting to know it and getting to know your relationship with it, then a lot of your behaviors can be explained.
Thank you so much. That's super helpful. That's a great kind of paradigm shift and an ability to look at it from just normalizing it, befriending it.
Yeah, and ask yourself, am I doing this to get fear under control? I love to personify fear. See fear as a person in your life. Are you doing this as a way to quiet him down? And then ask yourself, why is he speaking so loud? Maybe I should have a conversation with him and listen. Like, why have you become so excessive? Like, are you trying to get my attention? And if so, what do you have to say? And usually if fear is really loud and showing up as anxiety or OCD, usually what it's saying is, stop ignoring me, pay attention to me. And if you learn how to pay attention to the fear, then the behaviors around avoiding it or ignoring it go away.
Hey, something you said about eccentric people made me want to acknowledge someone on the call, Michelle Roy. Who's a great friend of ours. And it's funny, Michelle, I was thinking of you earlier when Kristen was talking about, you've taken on fearful challenges very intentionally. Running 400 miles in Pittsfield, something that scares the heck out of me. And I'm a runner, and I would never embark on that. But I also know that you've had health challenges that were terrifying, that you didn't choose. And so I just wanted to ask if you have any thoughts on the difference between choosing things that other people would find terrifying, and dealing with things that you didn't choose that are terrifying, and how you've been able to learn from one for the other.
Am I on? Can you?
You are, yeah.
Actually, I was thinking about asking a question about that. So I always wondered if it was normal or okay that when I was going through some serious health issues that I couldn't control, that's when I got involved with endurance events and extreme endurance events, because I felt like I had no control over any part of my life. But this thing, I did. I could pay my fee. I could go out there and I could stay the 10 days running in the woods, and I could forget all of the scary stuff that I didn't have control of. So I never realized it, but I always felt like it was a positive thing, but in a way I think it was kind of running away from what I didn't have control over and trying to find something else that, at times, Johnny, we all know putting yourself in these situations. And obviously, Kristen knows this because her situations scare the hell out of me. I wouldn't do any of the things she said ever. A paraglide, ski, no. I like my feet on the ground. So we do things that are scary, and we do things that can actually cause us harm. Like, why do we do those things? I think for me, it was because I just wanted to have a break from the scary stuff that I couldn't control. And I liked the idea that, I can control my body feeling tired. I can control, my body, my knees hurting from being on the mountain for 8 days. I can control these things and I can push through it. I can't really control cancer. Like, I don't, even if you have the best doctors out there, you still can't, you yourself, it's kind of like a roll of the die. So I would love to know, Kristen, when you did all of your amazing, amazing fearless, or you don't like to be called fearless, but to me, boy, doing those things, were you ever finding that you were taking one fearful thing and replacing it with another?
I want to start just by saying the story of your relationship with fear is the story of your life. And in my book, I told the story of my relationship with fear. And I mean, I loved it. I loved feeling it. It made me feel so alive, but I also resisted it. And I actually wound up having a lot of health issues as a result of having ignored fear. All those years I had completely crashed adrenal system. I didn't like who I was too. I became this super masculine person to overcompensate for fear. And back to the analogy of fear being like droplets of water coming through your hose, through your body. You know, if you kink the hose, that water backs up and becomes like stagnant pool, cesspool, right, for bacteria and illness, cancer to thrive. Like we know scientifically that stopped up emotions cause lower back pain, stiff shoulders, all those things. We also know that stopped up emotions can create the ideal host environment for like rheumatoid arthritis to get triggered, or Parkinson's, and all these things. Like, it's the worst thing that you can do physically to your body to stop up the flow of fear or anger or sadness or any of those other emotions. And so I just wanted to kind of introduce that concept to the group. And of course, now we're going to be like all stressed out that we've stopped up the flow of fear. Like, that's not my intention. But and everybody is so different, Michelle, and everybody has such a remarkably different relationship with fear. I don't know what your experience was, where maybe you were so sick of fighting a war with fear to balance things out. I also see a lot, and in order to be that, they block out fear, and then it shows up double in another area of their lives. Like I know a woman doctor in New York who's super fearless at work, but every time she goes skiing, she's just pickled in fear, like 2x what it should be. So everybody is so different. And so I just want everybody on the call to just notice, what is your relationship with fear during Spartan races, or during, like, I'll tell you, Michelle, I would never do the things that you do either. Right. And I, probably because I can't, my knees are too shot from skiing, but maybe I would. I don't know. Just ask yourself though, did you go into the mountains and into these running races in order to have a different relationship with fear, to maybe have a radical pendulum swing from what you've been doing that may be going on? Or was it a place where you were more successful at blocking out fear? You know, asking ourselves these questions, like, what is, like, see fear as a person. What is my relationship? You can call it a child, a roommate, an employee in your corporation. Like, what is my relationship with this roommate, this child? You know, am I taking it out to play when I go running in the mountains? Or am I just leaving it behind? Like, are you going into the mountains to run away from your fear, or are you running towards your fear? So these are questions that we can all be asking ourselves.
This hour has not disappointed. Kristen, you're awesome. Check out her book. Tell us again the full title of the book, so when they look it up, they get it right.
It's The Art of Fear, Why Conquering Fear Won't Work, and What to Do Instead. I have a course with Spartanology about mood. You can also go to my website, KristenUlmer.com, and I have a free fear and anxiety assessment if you want to try and decipher your unique relationship with fear. Before we go, I want to say your relationship with fear is the most important relationship of your life, because it's the relationship that you have with yourself at your core. And let's make it the best relationship possible. Now is a huge opportunity to investigate that relationship, because we have feeling a lot of fear. You're never going to feel more fear than you do right now. Well, maybe you will. But anyway, thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Your questions have been amazing.
Thanks for listening to this recording of our daily Spartan Up podcast Zoom chats. To get the schedule of upcoming guests and sessions, follow us on Instagram at Spartan Up Podcast or Twitter at Spartan Up Pod. And if you want access to the Spartan Edge course for free, go to learn.spartan.com, click on Redeem Code, and then enter the code podcast. If you want to stay up to date on all of our episodes, including our Tuesday interviews with Joe DeSena, our mini episodes with Spartan's chief mind doc, Dr. Laura Pence, and our new Spartan Combat series, make sure you hit subscribe.